Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Thank you for my life and my sobriety. We're so excited to have you here. Let's see if we can get through some of these questions. And I'll direct them to either of you, and then the other two can jump in if you have something to add to it. So hopefully that'll help guide us a little bit. And these are questions that have been submitted through emails. And so hopefully any one of you still out there, they'll get to answer your questions here today. And you take the time you need. We have, what, an hour and a half, Ali, right? So you can guide yourselves on the time if that's okay. All righty, here we go. Let's see, now I got a bunch of them. I found myself highlighting what I wanted to ask first, but can you talk a bit about your newcomer experience? So can you talk about what it was like when you first came in? What was that like for you? And let's start with, how about you, Stan? Would you like to start?
Thank you. My name is Stan. I'm an alcoholic. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, that's 51 years ago. I came in the city. It was a city. There were a few meetings. There were 3 or 4 ladies in Alcoholics Anonymous. There was nobody under the age of probably 26 or 28. And we drank a lot of coffee, but we did it in people's homes as opposed to the donut shop or the restaurant, mostly because we didn't have any money for the restaurant or the coffee shop. And so I grew up in a fellowship, which is what we had there. The fellowship made up of 1 or 2 or 3 groups. And we were just we had a herd instinct, and we just hung together. That's what it was like there. Thank you.
I'll go next. I'm Mildred. I'm an alcoholic. Glad to be
Mildred.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Really glad to be with you, Mickey. Haven't seen you for a while. And Stan is from my past. There aren't many people around that remember me and the bad actor I was, but Stan has a good hook on that. Anyway, my first experience in Alcoholics Anonymous was in Prince Albert, and sometimes around Saskatoon. But those were the days when I was in AA but stoned. And what I remember about that experience is the unbelievable kindness that I experienced. Nobody told me to get out, and nobody said, you're not worthy to be here, and unless you clean up, you can't. You know, people were kind. I can't remember how many times I was 12-stepped. And I once asked Cease, why did you always come when I called? Because they always did. And he said, because he said the most profound thing I've heard about this. He said, we never knew when the call was going to be the right one. And then I drank some more, and then I came in again in Toronto this time. And my experience was this: unbelievable kindness. And I can't say we had the fellowship, you know, in people's homes, because we had meeting rooms. But what I do remember is that people stepped up, and I never left a meeting because I was living on Skid Row and I didn't look good and I couldn't talk good. I was broken. And they'd always at the end of the meeting say, Mildred, be sure that you come back. We need you. And I couldn't figure out why they would need me. And then after my first sponsor got drunk, 2 men stepped up to the plate. They didn't want to 13 step. They said, you're too sick to stay here if you don't do the steps. And they came every week early and they read the book to me and they told me what to do. So my experience of being 12-stepped was nothing but kindness and the goodness of the program welcomed me in. You're muted, Mickey.
I'm asking
Mickey, you should be able to unmute yourself, Mickey.
Okay. It said the host is sick and tired of you. He's not going to unmute you. I couldn't believe it. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I'm Mickey. I'm an alcoholic. And my experience of just coming into this fellowship, was that I was about to be fired from the best job I'd ever had. I was married and had a 3-year-old daughter, and I was the sole supporter. And so I was to have a meeting with my boss that particular morning. 2 men came to my house the night before and 12-step me. And they got to the door. I called them. My wife was out actually at a pottery class. And I was sitting in my house and I said, man, I got to do something. So I called Alcoholics Anonymous, 1311 York Street in Denver. And they said, can you come over? I said, I can't, I've got my daughter here. So they said, we'll come to your house. And I got very nervous because I went around the house cleaning up because I didn't want them to think I was a drunk or something, you know. And so, and then I thought, oh my God, what are the neighbors gonna think? Like they came with sweatshirts that had a big A in the middle on the chest, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, this is gonna be something. Anyway, they rang the doorbell, and right before they did, my wife, Marie, came home. And I said, Marie, I've called Alcoholics Anonymous. I've called York Street. And she said, should I stay? I said, I don't know, because they actually don't give you a blueprint for your own 12 steps. So we let him in. We met him at the door. And I said, you know, I'm Mickey, and I'm an alcoholic, which I had never used that label on myself. And I said, this is my wife, Marie, and she's not an alcoholic. And I said, is it okay if she stays? And he said, the lead guy looked at Marie and he said, can you be honest? And I vouched for her. Big deal, right? I vouched for her honesty, and they came in and they started telling me about this disease. Not too long before this, Marie and I had had a nice talk sitting in our house as to what nut house we were going to put me in. I mean, so the wheels were coming off. Anyway, the next day I was to go to my first meeting, but I had to tell my boss in the morning that I'd found out what was wrong with me because I'm fighting for my job. Well, you know, Bill, and so we met at the airport. I don't know why we did. We met at the airport in the coffee lounge. And so, I said, Bill, I've just found out that I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to my first AA meeting today. And he just looked at me, didn't say a word, and got up and left. And I thought, oh my dear God, I've already flunked, and this is my first time to try to get straight. And he was a phone nut. And so what happened, he had gotten a call, and he picked that moment to answer it. And he came back and he sat down, and I mean, I'm shaking in my shoes and my London fog raincoat. Let's not leave that out. You know what I mean? So I'm there, and he didn't say a word, and he looked at me and he reached into the breast pocket of his coat and he pulled out the 24-hour-a-day book. So I didn't have any fancy footwork. I had nothing. And God met me right there in that airport and like reached out and patted me and said, it's going to be okay, kid. We're going to do this thing. And I went to my first meeting that day. I didn't know what to expect. We all sat around the table and everybody got a red book. Now, I didn't know what was in the red book, but I belonged, you know what I'm saying? Because I got a red book too. And so here was my first meeting then, and I'm not going to go on forever, but these are treasures in my life. And so we were having a discussion meeting, and the lady next to me jumps up and she says, I'm so happy today. I can't say it. I got to sing it. And she did. And I'm sitting there with my red book. She's singing. And here we go on my new, venture into life. But let's not leave this other guy out. Then around the circle, this guy said that he was drinking in Philadelphia, and he broke into the armory and he stole a tank. I'm not making this up. He said he stole a tank and was looking for the bullets or shells in it when the police arrived. And that was my first experience of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I heard after that, people said, you've got to be very careful for the newcomer. You have to just treat them the real so. And listen, if they had told me, Mickey, you got to stand on your hands in the corner and stack BBs, I'd have done it. I was so scared. And I stayed at 1311 York Street during the day when I got off work, and I got my bowl of navy bean soup from the kitchen, and I stayed there till the cabbies came in, and then I would go home. I was afraid to leave. Anyway, that's how I started.
Thanks,
That's
Mickey.
awesome. This is going to be good. I should have started off, if you don't mind, asking each of you if you can share your sobriety date and how many years, so those of us who can't add that up will know what that is.
Mildred?
Mildred.
My sobriety date is May the 18th, 1973, and that's 47 years.
Stan?
June the 6th of 69 years.
And mine's February 12th, 1974, and that's 47 years.
And I would make one more comment. I was carried to AA because somebody came and found me and called me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I met a man there that night that I was convinced I had been at his wake. But there he was at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That man became my sponsor. He stayed my sponsor for 50 years until he passed away last year. So not only have I enjoyed the privilege and the right of being sober for all these years, but I enjoyed the same sponsor for all those years. So it works.
And sorry, and can I add just one thing? My sponsor was my first real sponsor was an incredibly important person in my life. And he is slipping into dementia. And my wife has been going over and helping empty out his apartment. We have a friend in Al-Anon who found him assisted living, and he's alive. And I owe my life to George. And so that's that. Thank you.
That kind of leads me into the next question, which was going to be about sponsorship. What can you talk a little bit about what it's been like being a sponsee and being a sponsor? And have you changed sponsors through the years? Some of you have already mentioned it a little bit, but what has it been like being a sponsee and being a sponsor all these years?
Who's up?
Oh, let's start with Mildred.
Good. Thank you. I'm very happy to talk about that subject because I too had a sponsor. I'm sober 47 years and I had the same sponsor for 44 years. And I can't speak highly enough of what that process meant. As a matter of fact, I would say I'm sober and I have the kind of life I have today, of course, because of the grace of God, but also because of the sponsor. I came here really broken and not really knowing how to live. I started drinking when I was 5. And I think all semblance of growing up stopped right there. He understood that. And I always remember he never sloughed me off. He always had time for me. But what he did was he would take me aside and he taught me what the principles of the steps were. And he taught me how to apply. Like I was teaching in a school, my first job, and I was really quite crazy. And he understood the difficulties I was having. And he would talk to me about which step we're going to apply to this. And then he'd give me the strategy for taking it into my life at the college. He was absolutely wonderful. And our relationship continued like that. He never told me what I should do, but he always explained to me how the spiritual principles apply. And to this day, anything he's taught me, I still try to apply it because he was never wrong. As far as being, and by the way, as I said, he was my sponsor 44 years, and I have another sponsor now. That relationship is very different, but it's a relationship of truth and understanding. And he is helpful to me in the way I'm not I'm not that newbie, but he's helpful to me in a way that I really appreciate. As far as being a sponsor, it's one of the great gifts of life, I think, because in being a sponsor, I have found out where my problems are. I have found out how I came at the first, I was very controlling. I didn't know how to deal with people. I had to learn. And there again, my sponsor helped me with that. And it has been the joy of my life to deal with people, different kinds of people. I have learned how to deal with people. Not everybody can be treated exactly the same. And I think I'll leave it at that. I have had sponsees and new sponsees all throughout my existence, and it has helped me to become aware of what I really believe about the program and what I really believe is the change process as we apply spiritual principles. Thanks.
Go for it, Stan.
Thank you. Well, this sponsor that I had, that I acquired actually, almost that he was self-appointed, actually walked with me and talked with me for all of those years. He was a international construction manager. He tramped around the world. Didn't matter where he worked or what kind of country he was in. Somehow, some way, he always found ability to go and keep in touch with me and encourage me and move me forward. And he just walked with me for all of those years. In the last few years of our relationship and before he passed, the roles kind of reversed a little bit. I now kind of became his mentor and he kind of allowed me to do that, which was really the privilege of after being sober all of those years, that he would allow that sort of thing. But he did, and he accepted it all gracefully, and he would invite and encourage me to share with him the things that he wanted to know and the things that he wanted to hear. I have sponsored many people since I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and each and every one of them had different issues and different problems and different views of the world around them and different relationships with family or friends or acquaintances, or they were in a relationship or they were out of a relationship, or they'd been in jail or they were out of jail or they were heading to jail or they were at work or they weren't working or they were alcoholics. And I learned very early that my job was not to give them advice. My real task was to share with them the experience of my life. I came to AA, I was broke. I was living in the basement of my home. My family was living upstairs. They were gracious enough to allow me to live in the basement. And I didn't know, I had no idea really how to be a husband. I was a bad employee. I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to be a brother or a neighbor or a friend. And so he and others in that early groups taught me how to get up in the morning and pack a lunch bucket and go to work. They walked with me and talked with me and taught me how to be a father and how to be a son, how to be a husband, how to be a friend, how to be someone they could trust. And so that's what I tried to instill in others, what had been bestowed upon me as a result of others' efforts in this helping me to be sober. And so I think leadership today has changed a little bit. I don't think it's the same as it was then. My old friend Mac from Winnipeg, he used to say that there's no problem in Alcoholics Anonymous so great that better sponsorship couldn't solve it. And we have lots of people coming in the door today into Alcoholics Anonymous, and we tend to not to keep them. whether we don't walk with them the same way as we used to, or we don't talk to them the same way as we used to, or there's less desire on their part than we had. Perhaps they haven't gone as far down the ladder as some of us have gone. Perhaps they have a different reason to not hang around for a long period of time, or perhaps it's us that have been there, that are not sharing with the way it was shared with us. Thank you.
So, thank you. My experience with sponsorship was very interesting because I got into a group that was this was after 3 years at 1311 York Street, and I would go to the meetings there, and I would just talk to people and whatever, and I really never had a sponsor that was out of the book, and so I was exposed to a group that was very, very precise in dealing with that book, and so I learned precision, but they had an edge to them that was they called it tough love, and I called it abuse. It was really bad news. And so I needed to get somebody to help me that at least I could have a conversation with without, getting shredded down to my tennis shoes. So I said, okay, and I found George. And George was a little guy with a burr haircut, and I thought I could steamroller him. I thought, okay, we'll go for George. And it turns out that George had just come back from 3 tours in Vietnam as a Navy medic attached to the Marines, and he was one of the toughest people I ever met. And but he was loving. And what happened is I could hear him. You know what I mean? Now, earlier on in my time in AA, Don Pritz helped me, and Gary Brown helped me, and so I was with those guys, and this is the way I came into AA. And I'm going to come back to George, but I got my first. I celebrated my first AA birthday in a graveyard. Well, it was a building connected to a graveyard, and there was a lady there that used to come in these tight leather outfit, you know what I mean, on the back of a Harley Davidson driven by a heroin addict, and I was terrified of her, you know what I mean? And so I got up to give my little pitch in for my first year to say, thank you. And she came up afterwards and she wrapped her arms around me, and she stopped and she peeled herself off me, and she looked at me and she says, I will never do that to you again before I warn you. So I was not exactly touchy-feely. I didn't want to hold hands with anybody. I was really up the chimney. Anyway, I worked with George, and he put his whole heart into me. And he listened to me, and he helped me. And I would go over there, and he had a picture on the back of his door of him and his fatigues in Vietnam. And he had lost 100 pounds in Weight Watchers, my sponsor. And so I would go over there, and he would be counseling me, and I'm getting Weight Watchers ice cream and cookies. And he said, it's okay, Mickey, there's vitamins in them. I was 6'3" and weighed 140 pounds, but I'm eating my vitamins. You know what I mean? There was this bond between me and George. And he walked me out of the valley. And he kept saying, Mickey, just remember, it's always darkest before the dawn. And I would call him on the phone and I would say, George, is it dawn yet? I mean, I was so dependent upon him. And I went to meetings and I worked out of the big book. And ultimately, that was my experience. And then to tell you my relationship with Alcoholics Anonymous in the early days, I came home excited to Marie one day and I said, Marie, somebody apologized to me. I'd spent my time saying, I'm sorry, because I kept running into walls and not knowing what the heck was going on. Somebody apologized to me. Man, we could have had a celebration on that one. Anyway, and then somebody asked me to sponsor them. And I did not come from a poor family. I came from a well-to-do family, but I would not work with anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous newly coming in that wasn't straight off the skids. I just felt like they were the people and I would devote myself to them. And that's who I worked with. And Stan's right. They didn't stick around a long time, but anyway, they kept me sober. And then it dawned on me that middle-class people are just as in danger as lower-class people. And so I started to work with them, and I've never stopped doing that. And it is this, have you ever noticed when you're talking to somebody that you sponsor, that there's wisdom coming out of your mouth and you can't believe how wise you are? And that's what I experience in sponsorship. It ain't me. It's God going right through me. And I'm going, wow, that was great. I don't say it out loud to them, you understand, but that was great. And God uses me to talk to people in a manner that they can accept. And I like to respect people. And I've been doing it a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see here. How do you keep the program alive and fresh after so many years of sobriety? Would you like to start for us, Stan?
Sure. Well, when I was carried to Alcoholics Anonymous, there were but a few meetings a week, and they just made sure that I got to the meetings. And they convinced me that I didn't know anything, and so if I was going to learn something, get to me. And I recall after being around a few weeks or several weeks that I decided I didn't need that anymore, and so I didn't go to the meeting. And the meeting normally would start at 8 o'clock, and at 8:05, the doorbell rang, and here were the people from the group with the coffee pot and the big book. And what I got out of that was, if I don't go to the meetings, they're going to just terrorize my home. And so I just made a commitment and to go to the AA meeting, and I've dedicated myself to try to be of service, not only to the fellowship as a whole, but within the group. And so I'm very dedicated to the group. I keep a close association with a number of members of Alcoholics on other bases. And I just do the things that I was told when I first came, just walk and talk with the people. And the more I walk with you and the more I talk with you, the more insight I get, the more desire I have to commit myself one more day to do this one more time. Mickey might not understand this, but this morning here, it was like minus 38 below zero. And when a 12-step call comes and it's 35 below or 38 below, and it's 9 o'clock at night and you're watching the hockey game or the basketball game, and now you have to make a decision. Am I thankful and say, excuse me, no on this one, or do I, out of gratitude, jump one more time into action and go? So I'm kind of an action kind of a person, and just do what they did for me when I came. That still keeps Alcoholics Anonymous fresh, and it keeps it interesting, and it keeps it exciting for me. And if you're around long enough, people actually believe that you know something, and they approach you and encourage you and invite you to participate with them. And you can't be 50 years sober and be 40 years old. So they keep me young by them being young, but inviting me to be there. So that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is for me today.
Thank you. Mickey, how about you? How do you keep the program fresh?
There's so many people who have contributed their experience to my life. And I find, that there's maybe a key from one of them that I can use on this situation with this person. And so I keep it fresh because the way I do is I totally understand that I don't have alcoholism. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm dispensing. And do I teach? Well, I share, but teaching would be like coming down from some spiritual hilltop. That's That's not it. We're all, all in all, I'm just another brick in the wall. And I keep that in mind. And if I don't mess around, if I mess around with this thing, I could die of it. Now, I don't work my life or my program out of fear. Marie and I meditate and pray in the morning every morning. And we actually sing psalms together every morning to honor God. And our meditation is, we take the first 15 minutes of our day and give it back to God. The first fruits of our day, of the day that God has given us life. So all of these things combined, and plus my wife is a black belt Al-Anon, 47 years, and I'm making a joke, or am I? But anyway, so, I get watched over by the angels and the saints and God and my wife, and she's my seeing eye person. That's how I keep it fresh.
And thanks, Mickey. And me, it has never occurred to me not to be excited about AA. And that's just the way it is. I came here a broken person. And the way I was introduced to AA was in Prince Albert. And even though I was doing it all wrong, they included me. They became my family. I didn't get to know you too well, Stan, but I sure knew who you were. And the crowd in Prince Albert, they took me everywhere and even took me on 12-step calls. Then when I came in 1973, I was broken and I had a lot to learn. Right to this day, I have things to learn. And it, for me, has been a growing experience. Like I've had fabulous, fabulous experiences. And all of it, of course, has been with people. The one thing I've done right, I've stayed in the center. I've always had a home group. I've always been active in that group. And I've always been active in the larger AA picture. And of all the things that I've done wrong, that's the one I did right, was stay in the middle. And I have to say that, sponsoring is always exciting because the different people that have come for sponsorship or that have called for help, I find that always very interesting because you can't treat them all alike. You get to know people, and that's wonderful. And you get to see people change. And the other piece, I really came here, despite 15 years in a convent, I came here and went through a period where I really was an agnostic. That just didn't work so good. And I had to work my way through that. And so I have an active, I'll say it because it's part of who I am. I have an active spiritual life. And that also gives meaning to what it is that I do. And it helps me I think I need to say this. I've really learned to love people in AA. I did not like people when I came in. And when, through the process of the people who have inputted to me, the people who have loved me and who have allowed me to love them, I have grown, I have changed. And I really love life and I really love people. And, that has been the gift of being here this long. Thanks.
Thank you. That leads me to another question, which is, as you find yourself transforming in recovery, how has your higher power changed, if it has at all? Ooh, I know that's a big one. Look at Mildred. Oh, why don't you start us off, Mickey, on that one? She's
Okay.
like, oh my gosh.
All right. Um,
Try to answer that as simply as possible if you can.
how has my life changed?
And your life changing as you change, how has your higher power changed, if it has?
Holy hat, what a question. All right. Um,
Or your relationship with your higher power?
well, okay, this is getting tougher by the second, you guys. Okay. Wacko. I don't know if I'm actually going to tell the truth or not, so give me a moment here. All right, what the heck, you can't shoot me because this is over the air here. So what has happened is I was so sick and so damaged that I thought, my God, I'm going to flunk this thing. And I had people in AA look at me and say, kid, I spilled more booze on my tie than you ever drank. And there was this competitive atmosphere. And it was like, I'd been kicked out of most of the schools I'd been to, and I was really not in great shape. And then I'm getting this stuff, and I thought, oh my God. So I thought I was flunking it, and I really was very suicidal. And so I talked to this guy who people thought was this deep breather and had the answers, you know what I'm saying? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know, guy. He says, kid, maybe you're going to drink. And I went home from that and I thought, God, I'm only a few months sober and I'm going to drink my way out of here. And I've been drinking since, like Mildred, since I was 5 years old, and I was 27 years old. And I picked up a book by Thomas Merton called New Seeds of Contemplation. And in that book, chapters 32 to 36, he started to describe a spiritual experience according to his lights. And I read those chapters and I thought, my God, this is exactly what's happening to me. Now, my life in Alcoholics Anonymous has been filled with surprises. It's like surprising every day. And so the big surprise was what the nature of spiritual experience was for me and is for me. I thought it was going to be rainbows and moonbeams, and I was going to be happy all the time. And what happened was I stopped drinking and I ran into Mickey. I then learned this, but I couldn't define it early on, that actually the disease doesn't exist in the bottle, it exists in me. And the bottle was my solution for the disease that was eating me alive. So the God I ran into loved me, and he loved me enough to form me. There's a line out of scripture, and George gave me this thing. He found a holy card in a Methodist bookstore. Now I'm a Roman Catholic, but he found this card, and on it was a picture, and it was a big hand. It was a carving, wood carving, and there was a little child standing in the palm of the hand, and it said from scripture, see, I will not forget you. I have carved you on the palm of my hand. And I carried that card everywhere. That was my higher power. I carried that card around. And then you put Thomas Merton in on top of that. And how has my God changed? What does it say on the wall in the 11th step? I can't remember it immediately. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, right? Excuse me, but conscious contact. I'm going to drop a bomb here in a second. But anyway, so conscious contact, doesn't that mean that can he who made the eye not see and he who made the ears not hear, and then I'll add my own, and he who has a tongue not talk. So here we are. I'm driving across I promise you I'll shut up in a couple of minutes. I'm driving in town and I'm complaining to God early on in my sobriety, and I said, you know, I want to be an artist. I really want to be an artist. And this voice said to me, it would help, Mickey, if you'd get some paints and brushes. And I was like, what? And I'm getting this conversation. Well, I can tell you that how things have changed for me is I was encouraged by, I got this from another woman, and I listened to her talk, and she said, if you can't sleep at night, get a pen and a pad of paper and put it by your bed. And if you can't sleep, just say to God, I'm right here, talk to me. I'm right here, talk to me. So 20 years ago, I got my book and I got my pen, and my mother was 86 years old, recovering from a surgery, a brain aneurysm, 86, and she was going to come home and live with us in 10 days. And I got my pen and I wrote down, Mickey, your mother's going to die, and it's okay because your relationship with her is tied up with a ribbon. And my mother died the next day. And I have never stopped writing those pages. I have 400 pages of the God of my understanding talking to me. He doesn't give me who's going to win the quinella, you know what I mean? Or the lottery. And I don't ask him foolishness. I go to him and I only say one thing to him. I say, Jesus, will you talk to me? And he talks to me. And if I read to you what he says to me, he never criticized me once in 20 years. So much for being abused. and he gives me guidance and direction. And Maria and I share that God. And I share that occasionally with the people I sponsor. And I'm going to shut up. And I can tell you that the God of my understanding thinks I'm a brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mildred.
Yes, I have a lot to say about this. A lot of wonderful stuff to say. I started looking for God when I was little. And the God that I encountered then did not behave the way I wanted him to. And then at 5, I found alcohol. And I had my solution for what I thought was okay. At 17, I went to a convent and spent 15 years in the convent, drunk, albeit. Doesn't work so well when you're drunk, but it works. And came out of the convent and left the church. I didn't leave the church because I was angry at the church or angry at the convent. I realized something. I had to get honest. I love what you said, Mickey, and I totally respect that. I had to leave, and it's a decision I made that I've never regretted. I have found my God, and in ways that I could not have understood. I think that for a lot of years, I expected when you said, how has God changed? God, I don't believe has changed. I think God is the eternal reality. It's I who have changed and see things so different. I used to look at the power as, give me, this is what I want. Your God, fix it the way I want it to be. And it didn't work that way. And that almost took me to the grave. And so I had the spiritual awakening and came into AA in 1973. But what I realized then was I had no relationship with God. One of the reasons I didn't know how to have a relationship with myself, and I didn't know how to have a relationship with people. And what I feel is if we come here with willingness and an open heart, everything is unrevealed. And at 20 years, what I found was a way to deal with my inner stuff. I hadn't known that. Bill writes about it in step 8 in the 12 and 12. And I got to do that work. And then the world started to show up with great experiences. I was able, I had to do the work, but I had to do the work, but I can't change myself. And I realize that it's about being changed. And that's why I often say to people, don't give up, because if you stay, what you need will be revealed. I look at my life now and I'm so happy, and I like the world, I like myself, and I like you. And that's just amazing to live in a world like that. I used to say, I'm going to die, as an oddball. No, I'm not dying as an oddball. I'm dying as a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I couldn't have orchestrated my life. And I don't believe that it's God that has changed. It's me that has been changed in the process. And you were talking, Mickey, about how you see God. I've learned to see God in the sky every day. That's where I do my best talking, is standing on the balcony talking to the God that created the beautiful earth and the beautiful heavens. And I could say a lot more. I'm just so grateful that this program, as I look at it, it's set up so beautifully. It all starts from conceding. I conceded that I don't know how to live. And from then on, it feels to me as if grace showed me all the way along to get where I am today. And that's not just for me. I think that's available to everybody. And I love hearing how you describe it, Mickey. This is what my life has been like. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about that.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you. I was brought to Alcoholics Anonymous as a non-believer. Not because I was a non-believer, but because I had never been taught, shown, or led to believe. I had never been in a church in my life. I had never been to a Sunday school. I had never seen the book. And I was brought to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they told me there that I would need to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, as I understood it. Well, I didn't understand them, and I had no knowledge, no insight, no ability, and not much desire. And so they just invited me and to just turn my will and life over to Columbus, turn it over to the good old drunks, and that would be God enough for me at the moment. And so that's what I did. And that's what I did for a long time. The group was the power that was greater than myself. The good old drunks that were there were the power greater than myself. And they would tell me things like, if you just listen carefully about what other people talk about when it comes to God, and if you just watch the changes in their lives, and the good things that are going on in their lives, and the good relationships that they have going on in their lives as they express the goodness of God, that one day you get suspicious that there's something to this thing called a power greater than yourself or God. And so that is where I was at. I have no idea what day it was. I don't know what hour of the day it might have been. But one day I realized that I had come to believe in a power greater than myself. And I found a desire to learn to live by some basic spiritual principles. And that was my insight into a power greater than myself. Has it changed over the years? Of course it's changed over the years, because I'm more thankful. I'm more open-minded. Speaking of more open-minded, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, the most expensive thing I owned was a closed mind. And as my mind started to open up, I started to have new insights. There was new information. There was new will. There was new desire. And all of these years later, I can tell you that I believe in a power greater than myself. I've given that power a name of God that has walked with me and talked with me, as has the fellowship. The result is that I've learned how to be a father, a son, a neighbor, a friend. I've learned how to contribute something to the community. I've learned how to not be a taker anymore, to give more. And I have learned some basic spiritual principles of truthfulness and honesty. I'm a changed person. I came here as a broke person. I came here as a person with really no ability to earn a living. And as a result of this walk and this talk with this power that I didn't always understand, I've been able to earn a living. I've been able to change the way I live. I've been able to learn how to be a father, son, husband. And in a simple word, perhaps, I've learned about the grace of God. Thanks.
Thank you. How about, I just had it. Sorry. There was a question that had to do with, is there a difference between spiritual experience and spiritual awakening? Okay, I was looking at that one for the next question. I don't see it, but yeah. Is there a difference between spiritual experience versus a spiritual awakening? And now I guess with the time, the three of you can answer or one can decide to answer it. So I want to make sure I try to get the rest of these questions in our next half hour. So who would like to take that one?
I'll take that.
Thank you.
I think that spiritual experience is what it says. It's an experience. And an experience is kind of, in a sense, confined. I think that historically, when people have talked, and if you go back in history, when people have had spiritual experiences, it's been an event and it has achieved what it set out to achieve. Bill Wilson had the experience, and I had an experience of a kind. What it did for me was take the compulsion and the obsession, and I've never had it again. It didn't change the way I thought, the way I lived. That's where the spiritual work comes in, and that's where the spiritual awakening comes, through the living of life. You know, the question you asked was, has God changed? Well, I think what happens is, this is my experience. I had the experience which enabled me to handle life sober, but I didn't know how to handle life. And it was the wake up process that enabled me to change. I'll tell you, and then I'll be still. One thing Bill Wilson wrote, I don't know exactly when it was, but he said, he believes we all get the same thing. He acknowledged that he had a spiritual experience, but he said, I think we all get the same thing. He said, if any one of you who have seemed to come to it more gradually, he said, if you take all the aha moments, that was his language, and compress it into 6 minutes, he said, you too would see stars. And then the work would begin. Thanks.
You're all laughing.
Okay,
Need to see the stars, Mildred.
Yeah.
okay, I'll dive in if I may.
Sure.
I don't really see a difference between a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening. Now, this is just in my life. I've not had, well, for instance, I did not meditate for 30 years coming into my sobriety, because I kept expecting an angel, or I was going to levitate, or I was going to smell roses, I was going to do something, and all I got is the wallpaper. And I thought, well, this isn't working. So I backed out. So that to me would have been a spiritual experience. A spiritual awakening was what I got when I read Merton. And I found out that I was on the right path. That was a tremendous awakening for somebody. I'll tell you about my self-esteem. When I got sober, I thought that the only thing I was going to be able to do was be a janitor somewhere and live in the basement of my own house. I know that sounds pretty weird, but then I was pretty weird. Anyway, So to find out that, God has some use for me, that's a spiritual awakening, all righty, Rue. That's my contribution.
You have
Stan?
anything to add, Stan?
No, I think they did well. So just carry on.
Thank you. How about you take this next question? You can start if you have something to add to it. I'm going to put two of them kind of together, which is one is, do you ever consider drinking? And then someone asked, was there a time after a significant period of sobriety where you almost drank? What caused it, and how did you stay sober? Who would like to take that one? Stan, you want to do that one, or anybody?
I think Stan should do it. I really am
Go ahead,
counting.
Stan.
Thanks very much. I shouldn't have refused the last one. Now I have to pay penance, apparently. But what I'm thinking about, when would I have the last thought of having a drink? I wouldn't know when that is. I have no idea when that is. From time to time, when something untoward is happening in my life, or something that I wish was different than the way it is, I might have a thought that might run through my mind quickly that would say, in the old days, I would think of having a drink. That's as close as I ever get to having a drink. So I don't know when the last time was that I ever thought of picking up a drink, actually having a drink. I was a year sober or thereabout. I was in Montreal at a college. I wasn't going to AA meetings because no one there. I wouldn't understand anyone there. I had a bunch of reasons not to be going, and I was with a bunch of guys, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and they were all drinking, and I realized at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon that if I stay with these guys, I'll drink, and so I left. And I'm standing on the street corner waiting to catch a car to go back to the college. And a man came walking along and spoke to me briefly. And he said to me that he was just going across the street to the church there, that there was a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were going to this meeting because it was a birthday meeting. And I tagged along with it. And what was interesting was that I understood the language at the meeting, as I've understood ever since. I didn't maybe pick up on every word that was there, but I understood and came to know what the language was about. And that's what I think is what Alcoholics Anonymous is about: the language of the heart, the ability to one to share with the other, and to understand each other without being able to understand the other language that we may speak. And so I can't even imagine what a drink would do for me. What would it do for me? Would it make me a better husband, a better father, a better worker, a better retired guy? Would it make me a better guy at the bank? Would it make me a better guy wherever? Like, I can't imagine what a drink would do for me. So why would I even think such a thing? It says that somewhere that perhaps we may be at a point where we don't have the ability or the strength to say no. And so therefore, one more reason for me to go to another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. One more reason for me to talk and to walk with another person in Alcoholics Anonymous. Another reason for me to start one more time to apply the principles of truth and honesty in my life. And so, no, I do not think about drinking. It doesn't occur to me to drink. From time to time, with some disappointment I have when a member of my family continues to drink, when they've watched all of these years. And I say to myself, perhaps I wasn't as great an example as I could have been. And but that's their life. And only when they come to the point where God will do for them what they can't do for themselves, will they too get sober like I. Thanks.
I'd like to add something because I appreciate what you said, Stan. I have never had the compulsion to drink. I have never since May the 18th, 1973. And the only way I can come to understand that is that grace deals with us according to who we are. When I hear people say they struggled with, for a while with not drinking, I didn't. Like, I was a bad one. But once the compulsion was lifted and the obsession was lifted, it was gone. But life wasn't lifted from me. I had to deal with life. And I have to tell you, I've never thought about drinking, but I have thought suicide a few times. It's tough. I need to get out of here. I can't stand it. So I just think that our souls are grown by something bigger than we are. And we get, if we're willing, we're nudged along the way that power can nudge us.
Thanks, Mildred. I'll just throw in a quick one. My wife and I have a habit of watching English detective shows. And by jingle, they're always in a pub. Sooner or later, they're in that pub. And when I see that guy take that big long handle and pull that frothy thing, a Guinness or whatever into a glass, I register that. And I say, you know what? That drink right there, to Stan's comment, I'll tell you what it would do for me. It'd send me right to hell. And I go to God immediately. And that's how I react to that. But I notice it. And when I was first sober, I don't know, a few years sober, I took my 7-year-old son to a Denver Broncos football game. And we were kind of in the middle of the row. And so there was a hawker, selling big cups of beer at the end of the row. And you had to pass it to the next guy, pass it to the next guy. And I'm sitting there, and that beer, I passed it to this guy, and I said to myself, if one more beer gets passed in front of me, I'm going to drink it. And no other beers showed up. So God is good.
God is good. Thank you. How have you practiced the principles in your relationship and career? How have you practiced the principles in your relationship and your career?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay. Integrity is doing something when nobody else is looking, right? I am a custom cowboy boot maker. I'm working my shop, and I could cut a corner here, or maybe inflate a price there, but God is always watching. And so I do honestly the best job I possibly can, and I pray for my customers. And that has really helped me, and that's really changed my life. And I'm honest with my wife. As a matter of fact, I'm honest with pretty much everybody. And that's a new gig for me. That's my contribution.
Anyone have anything else on that, Stan or Mildred? How do you practice these principles in your relationship and career?
Well, I had a wife when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and she's been here ever since I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And she put up with my madness for 8 or 9 years before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm suspicious she's going to stay. And the reason I'm suspicious of that is because I like to think that we try and apply the principles of truth and honesty to our long relationship. And has there been a time or two when we stubbed our toe? Has there been a time or two where we created some pain in each other's lives? I'm sure that there was. Have I found ability to forgive, or has the desire been for me to forgive? Of course. That's what's made this relationship work. So I'm a believer in these principles of truth and honesty. Do we answer every question asked as honestly as we could? Perhaps we could do better from time to time. But it's just it's the way that it is. It's the way it is. We live by what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. Have I stubbed my toe from time to time? Of course. Will I stub my toe in the future? Of course. But that's not because I have set the principles aside. The moment self took over one more time. And the goal here, of course, is to set self aside. I measure this whole spiritual dimension of my life on three simple things. How restless am I? How irritable am I? And how discontent am I? If I'm not restless, irritable, and discontent, my spiritual life is in good condition, I think. If it's not, if I'm restless, irritable, and discontent, my spiritual life needs some work. And so when the spiritual life needs some work, that means that the principles have been diluted a little bit. So thank you.
As far as relationship goes, I'm not the poster girl for that. My marriage lasted a year and a half, and relationships, I've never, I don't have one. If we're talking romantic relationships, what I found was what got in my way with, like, this isn't about, how will I say this? What got in my way was the way I saw the world. And it took a while for me to be able to change that. I think the big crisis for me was really when I was about 20 years sober. That's when some big spiritual stuff happened. And I really started to look at the world different, because as long as I was operating out of that old childhood stuff that said, nobody cares about me, I'm not important, nobody loves me, I spent my life trying to manipulate people to love me, and that's not relationship. So, it's a big question. How do we practice integrity in relationship? And I think that I practiced integrity in some ways, but this thing I said, like, the childhood stuff really got in my way. But then at 20 years, I was shown how to deal with that. So I think, I'm a person who most of the time practices integrity, and you can trust me.
Would you say that it's gotten simpler the longer has the program gotten simpler the longer you've been sober? It's less complicated. They say simple program for complicated people. Would you say through time it's gotten simpler?
Absolutely. I see the world so different. My life is really very simple now. It's very pleasant, and it's despite COVID. It's very simple, because I used to trip on my own feet. I used to trip on my old ideas and all of that, trying to make the world the way I wanted. I just didn't get it for such a long time that that's not the way it works. And as I've done the work and as I have been changed, it just gets simpler and simpler.
I'm going to throw this in because I'm getting different messages too. At what point did you completely surrender and stop the resistance? That's an assumption that you resisted. But from the very beginning that you did a complete surrender, or did you struggle for a while until you finally said, Uncle, I'm all in? Anybody?
Surrender to what? I mean, what I surrendered the morning of May the 20th, 1973, my dry date is the 18th, but my God date is May the 20th. And what I surrendered that morning was, I don't know how to live. And, if I were to put one thing to these 47 years, it's been a process day after day of learning how to live. And the big changes, I said, for me came when I was 20 years sober and realized I had no relationship with God. and learned to deal with that inner stuff. And I would say the last 15 years are starting to flow very easily.
How about
I-
anybody? He's
Yeah, I'd like to comment if I may. You know, has it gotten simpler? I think it's on paper, it was always there. Has it gotten any easier? No. I don't have alcoholism. I still fight the selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear in my life. And I've asked God about that. I mean, can you take a couple of these babies away from me or whatever? And it's not, no, because I am a person among peers. And so if people were to say to me, Mickey, you just don't understand, I could say, actually, I do, because I've lived it and I do live it now, and it can take me out now. So I don't know. I curved your question. I know where the answers are, but I can't like just take a Tinkerbell deal and hit that thing and it goes away. It doesn't go away. I have to walk through it.
awesome. Couple of key questions want to come in. One in particular was for Mildred. I want to see how I plug that in. One has to do with the changes. This was from Marlene. The big book, with regards to the changes in the big book. Is this one from Mildred? Yes. This one someone sent particularly for you, Mildred, saying the General Service Conference is voting on the revision of the big book at the upcoming conference this spring. Please share your thoughts on what that would do to the fellowship.
I can't say what it would do to the fellowship, but I have strong thoughts about that. And like, it's kind of a two-pronged answer, and I'll be brief about it. I would not be in favor of changing the language, depending on what that would involve. Like, if people, are having difficulty with it, I think that's up to us to explain and help them to understand what is really being said. We don't try to change Shakespeare. We teach people how to read it. This is a program. This is the language in the big book has carried us this far. So there are millions and millions and millions of people that have led successful lives and have been okay with that and have grown from that. From that basis, I would say, no, we don't change it. However, I also recognize something else, that the people who are coming in, who are being introduced to the program, they're not the people that I met when I came in 1966, and then when I came in 1973. They're the people of the technological age, and all of that has transpired. Many of them have not had a background in church or even a thought, like this 37-year-old who came to me and said, I've never prayed in my life. God wasn't mentioned in our home. So to introduce the big book in that situation, but I don't see that taking it out. The book says, and I believe it, that if I'm alcoholic, I suffer from a disease which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So I don't know what it means when people talk about changing the language or changing the book. I'd have to know that first. And the other piece that I want to close with is this. I absolutely believe in the traditions. I'm not wise enough to say, this is what we should do. Don't change. That's why we have the tradition. God is the boss. And I think that if the fellowship, like Bill said, remember, I just read that today, where he, was all hell bent, was going to work in the hospital as a professional. He said, the group was right, I was wrong. And therefore, that's my idea. That's how I feel about it. I want to see it stay the same. However, if some changes were voted upon, and it would have to be the majority of the fellowship. That's my take on it.
Thank you. That was specific for Mildred. If anybody has anything else, but someone specifically asked that question to Mildred. The two of you okay? I want to make sure I get a couple of these in, and I think some of them are relatable to each other. Like a question is, how do you keep it green? And I think we kind of address how do you keep it fresh, but also asking, do you have any like morning spiritual practices? Yeah, do you have any morning spiritual practices, and how do you stay aware of your selfish and self-centeredness when it manifests? How do you stay, I would just say, how do you stay present, awake, and aware, right? And what are some of the other tools you may use? Any spiritual tools that you use? Some people are asking. Any other books? You've mentioned some already. And Stan, would you like to share on that?
Well, I start the morning by introducing myself to God. And I end the day by thank gifts that have been bestowed upon me. And as I keep repeating over and over and over again, the spiritual dimension of my life is based on my desire or my ability to walk and talk with the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I don't have any great spiritual plans going on in my day-to-day existence that I start as I get up in the morning and I have a half hour to do this and 10 minutes to do that and 5 minutes to do the other thing. I have never had that from the day I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. But what I have had is always a desire to be with others in AA, and to after having found this power, after having found this, it's no longer a question about the source. It's the question about the utilization of the source. And so I'm able, capable, and do throughout the day when there's pain in my life to stop and pause and reflect what my part is in that pain, and to invite God to help me through the hurdle. That's a big part of my life. And the result is that I live pretty comfortably in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't have a great desire to be some spiritual guru that is involved in all kinds of things that I haven't experienced. Smart enough for that. I don't have the wisdom to do that. But what I have the wisdom to do and have the ability to do is to continue to be suspicious about what you have and continue to try and grow that within me, what you've found. Thank you.
Mickey?
I'd like to add that I start the morning inviting God into my life. My wife and I do together, as I mentioned. And then when I go into my shop, I address the God of my understanding, who's on the wall in my shop. And I quote the 90th Psalm and I say, give success to the work of my hands. Give success to the work of my hands. And so, but if I stop praying in the day, things don't get as good as they could be and do when I pray throughout the day. You know, how am I going to talk to my wife? What's important? How am I going to talk to this service person I have on the phone? And can I make their day? And it goes on like that. So it's the whole day is involved in prayer. Now, in my nightly review, the one thing that it says, what could I have done better? And mine is continually, I could have prayed more.
Mildred, anything on that? How do you keep it green? What are the books you read? Practices? Keep it fresh?
Well, remember that I went, and I think we're all colored by our experiences. Don't forget that for a period, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I really was I was an agnostic, I think close to atheism. And it's a process. I won't go into that, but I really appreciate now having come to believe in the power of good. That was Tom I's gift to me. He said, I've found the power of good, and that's what I have found. And so in the morning, I'm disciplined about this now. I didn't used to be. I did Mildred's will. And now when I get up, I'm out to the balcony. That's my first place to go. I talk to God. I love the immensity of the sky. And it makes it easy for me to say, this is your day, God, and I'm going to do my best. And I have my little practices. One that I find really helpful is page 55, where it says, deep within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Remember, I said I didn't like people. And one day my sponsor took me aside and he said, you're quoting page 55. He said, I think that if you're quoting that, you should change the way you treat people. Mm. And so I really make that part of, what I do. As far as there's a book I've been introduced to lately. If you've never done spiritual, I don't know, I'll mention it. The author is Thomas Troward. And it's, if you study it, for me, it has given me, and the people that have read it with me, we've all benefited greatly. But the amazing part of it is this. He was a judge in India and he wrote these books in about 1900 something. And he wrote 5 books, and there's a compendium of all 5 books. And somebody sent this to me and said, I think you should take a look at this. I was reading the back cover. You know what it says? In the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, the members of AA, it was recommended they read Thomas Troward. And I thought, bingo, thanks.
That's awesome. With only a couple minutes left, right, Ali? We're narrowing down. I would like to give you the opportunity to share with us, take a minute or two to share anything that's come to you that you would just like to share with us. So I'll open the floor with something you would like to share with us without a question. How about Mickey? Anything you just like to part with?
Yeah, my mother had a sampler on the wall in her house, and I still try to live by this. A good marriage is a union of 2 good forgivers.
Nice. Mildred, thank you.
What I want to say is, I think that those of you, that Ali and Teresa, and those of you who have put this together, you have brought a great gift to the world, because you brought people together who a lot of people tonight are in a better place because this conference went on today. And I think that great thanks is due to you and great blessings. That's my contribution.
Thank you. Stan?
Just a big thanks to the committee. It's been wonderful. I've watched every meeting from the time it started yesterday right through until the end here. And the committee has done a wonderful job. I'm just really impressed with what I've heard. I'm really impressed with the maturity of Alcoholics Anonymous. What really impresses me is the fact that we got through the last hour and a half without a swear word, and that makes Alcoholics Anonymous much better in my eyes. I'm wearing the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and so I really appreciate the fact that the word has not been used much over the last 24 hours. Thank you. God be with you.
Thank you, Stan. I'd like to add one thing. I have a friend, in Santa Fe, and he was getting ready to speak in Oklahoma at a meeting. And there had been a minister who had gone before him, and he said, "Tom, I'm sorry, I've got to go, but I just want to offer you a little piece of advice." He said, "Give them heaven. They've had enough hell."
Mm.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness. Thank you all for your humility, your wisdom, your simplicity, practicality, and just being able to share one alcoholic talking to another. I want to thank you so much.